So last night, the Toronto Raptors and Orlando Magic played Game 4 in the Amway Center, and I didn't really have many expectations for the Orlando Magic going into this game because shortly after Game 3, it was pointed out that Kawhi only shot 26% in that game, and the Raptors still won. And that he was also sick as hell. But he didn't mention it because, well, that's just Kawhi. He's not going to say stuff, right? So it got me thinking, if Kawhi's shooting that poorly and the Magic can't capitalize on it, they basically have no win condition. And overall, this game kind of proved that point. So we're going into the first quarter, right? The Magic go on like a little bit of a run in the first 5 minutes, and that's when I thought, oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they got some more fight in them. Maybe they're gonna make this series a little bit more interesting, right? Raptors miss the first few looks, and I think the first 7 possessions of the game, it's all Magic, and then from there, the Raptors answer back. And Nick Nurse did not even need to call a timeout for this. Now, if you look at games 2 and game 3, right, games 2 and 3, when the Raptors went on their run in the first quarter, Steve Clifford is forced to call a timeout to get his boys back in there. Nick Nurse was like, yeah, let them be up, 7 or 11 to nothing. We'll get back into this. And that's what they did. This game was different, though, in the first quarter in the sense that a lot of starters that were performing poorly, particularly, Vucevic, DJ Augustine, and Evan Fournier, they actually hit a couple buckets in the first quarter. And I thought, okay, well, now everyone's kind of, maybe the Magic have found a way to initiate their offense or found a way around the Raptors' defense. And for the most part, in the first quarter at least, it seemed to be that every team was kind of getting what they wanted in terms of offense. So the score was fairly close. But then the Raptors go on a 17-4 run with 6 minutes left in the first quarter. And that really just deflated the Orlando Magic. They forced 5 turnovers for the Magic, and that was mainly due to Gasol's amazing defense on Vucevic. Despite Vucevic actually hitting a couple of shots, he would still end up being neutralized. Like, as you can see here in the game, 5 for 14. Most of these 5 field goals that were made in the first quarter. He didn't really he was not a factor after that first quarter. And Kawhi starts playing a lot better than he was in game 3. Like, you can tell he is making his shots. He seems more confident, more aggressive, and I'm inclined to believe that his sickness really did get in the way of his performance. There was a bit of an issue with the Magic in the sense that Jonathan Isaac, who's been playing very well this series, I think overall, he got into foul trouble. 2 fouls early into the first quarter, forces him out, and now you have a situation where, congratulations, your one person that could potentially guard Siakam is no longer in the game. And instead, Fournier is being switched onto him. And Fournier, defensively, not good enough to hold Siakam. So I knew when Isaac was forced out, I knew that Siakam in particular, or I suspected that he would have another great game for the Raptors, and this would cause more problems for the Magic in terms of defense, right? You also could see that Vucevic was incredibly frustrated towards the end of the first quarter. I think Kawhi was actually getting a couple of calls, and the Raptors as a team were getting a couple of calls as well. I thought some of them were bogus, but, that's what happens when you point out that the Raptors in this series, or in the previous game, in this series so far up to this game, had 10 trips to the line in game 2 compared to the Magic's 23. The Raptors essentially went to the line a lot less than the Magic. And I think the refs were trying to offset this glaring disparity. 13 less is a pretty big it's a pretty big gap. So yeah, they were just calling a lot of fouls, and you could just see the frustration start to build on some of the Magic players. Now, I will say this. Kawhi did get away with, I think, three in the key violations before he's finally called out for that. So the officiating, it wasn't good, but when are we ever going to call the officiating good, right? But I would have to say it was more balanced than the previous game. So another interesting stat that also came up was that Siakam has played the second most minutes in the entirety of the playoffs, and we do not see fatigue affecting him at all so far. And this is especially important because now that we're at game 4, going onwards in this series, there's only going to be 1 day in between games, which means that the bench is now going to be more important in the sense that of the 8-man rotation that's being run by both teams, or 9-man, or whatever you want to call it, right? The players that have been on the bench need to step up when called. Those 2-3 guys that you haven't played for a lot of minutes, they need to step up now because let's face it, only 1 day between games, the body needs a lot more time to properly recover from that. And that's where your bench guys come in and give you a nice little boost. Now, the bench for the Raptors really paid off this game. They really came up clutch almost. They took over the scoring load in moments where the starters were being rested by Nick Nurse because he knew that he would have to make sure that our stars, Kawhi, would get rest. Now, despite the Raptors going on that 17-4 run, the game is still fairly close at the end of the first quarter, with the Raptors only up by 2. There was one particular moment where I think Fred VanVleet is subbed in, and he gets called for something that Nick Nurse finds outrageous, and you can just see like a shot if you were watching the TNT feed of his mouth like gaping wide open, and I knew immediately that would be some meme quality right there on Reddit, and yeah, it was posted almost immediately. But anyway, moving on to the second quarter, it doesn't get any better for the Magic here. Jonathan Isaac gets another foul, and it's early into the second, and this is because of a Lowry charge. And because of this, he now has to play a lot more cautious with 3 fouls into the game. And I'm a little bit surprised in general why Steve Clifford hasn't really bargained with, keeping his players on the court. Like, I understand that he doesn't want Isaac to get another foul, but you got to stem the bleeding, Clifford. Like, you've allowed Siakam to, along with Kawhi, who you stuck Aaron Gordon on, which is a good defender, to basically go on that 17-4 run in the first quarter, and now you're letting Siakam have free reign again in the second, right? Essentially, I personally think if Clifford had kept Isaac in the game in the first quarter, the Raptors would have been down, and he could have put Isaac, subbed him off for Fournier in the second. But that's just my personal opinion. So second quarter in general, we start to see the bench step up at the right time. And prior to this game 4, the Raptors bench was completely being outscored and outplayed almost by the Magic bench. Like, the Magic had the superior bench in all the other games. But in this game, the Raptors bench, mainly Norman Powell and Serge Ibaka, they really came through. And we can take a look at the box score really quickly. Serge Ibaka, 5 for 6 in 20 minutes play, 13 points. Excellent, right? Norman Powell, I said he needed to heat up after what happened in game 1, and look at him right now. He has started to really step up, and he could be that 4th scorer that the Raptors need in order to make a deeper playoff run. Now, I think about overall, like, the second quarter, and the biggest glaring issue that I found with the Raptors, at least, was that there were some very questionable passes by Kyle Lowry. And what I mean by this is the offense with Lowry in general likes to be extremely fast. They love to run transition. They love to beat their opponents off a fast break. So you see these ridiculous long full court baseball passes by Lowry, which usually only Siakam can catch just because of his athleticism and physical ability, right? Like, a lot of times in game 2, game 3, I should say, when Siakam was doing his thing, a lot of the points that he got were passes from Lowry that were just, I don't think they were good passes. I just think Siakam managed to catch them. Like, you give that pass to anybody else almost, they don't get that bucket. They're not able to get and it showed in this game because Lowry had a lot of passes that led to turnovers, and I was a little bit worried that if we kept forcing, particularly those types of passes, the Magic would have been able to capitalize off of the turnovers, which they were unable to do in the last game, and actually, keep the game pretty close. But alas, that didn't really happen. And towards the end of the second quarter, Raptors had 7 steals. Right, you got 7 steals. Your defense is on fire. Your offense has seemed to figure it out as well. You got your bench playing well. Everything is going in the right way of the Raptors. And the fact of the matter is, without Isaac, you can no longer have anybody on Siakam, which in turn means that they got to run him off the 3-point line now because he can shoot the 3 reliably enough. Right, he can drive. So now you have to clutter the paint. Figure out Siakam, and by doing this, you free up Kawhi. You can't swarm 3 Magic jerseys into Kawhi in hopes of stopping him. And even when they did do that this game, it didn't work. He was nailing some really, really tough shots, and I think just this really, really sealed the Magic this game. Like I didn't want to call the game over by the second quarter, but the Raptors had managed to get, I think that was a 10-point lead to close the second, and their defense has started to come alive. They just started to suffocate the Magic again, force turnovers, even more so than the first quarter. You got Fournier, Augustine, Gordon, and Vucevic. They're not scoring as easily anymore, and the box score showed. So we're moving into the third quarter, and the Raptors, for the most part, are able to maintain this double-digit lead. They did, however, at one point give up a little bit of a run to the Magic, and that was just due to some careless turnovers. They let up a little bit on their intensity, but they managed to get that back at halfway through that quarter and just, push the lead back up to, I think it was 12, 14, or double digits, essentially. And in terms of that run that the Magic went on, a lot of it had to do with the fact that the Raptor offense stalled a bit in the third, especially the late third quarter. And this is because Nurse decided to finally give Siakam some rest as well as Kawhi, because he's most likely aware of the fact that fatigue is going to start to play a huge role going down the stretch. So without Siakam, without Kawhi, you're really essentially only limited to Gasol, Lowry, Danny Green, and your bench players. The thing with Danny Green is you got to get him open to make his shots. Like he can create shots, but make no mistake, the man is no Siakam when it comes to like playmaking, right? Lowry, I trust him to shoot the ball early. I don't really trust him to shoot the ball late. He's more of like everything else kind of guy. The same with Gasol. You need to be put in positions. You got to put these guys in positions to be the most effective. And so creating your own shot isn't something these guys can do. And this is where the bench really, really came in with Serge Ibaka and Norman Powell. I saw Norm getting so many points off drives and, reverse layups. It was a beauty to watch. And if the Raptors have that guy, the third guy that can create his own offense or force, pressure due to dribble penetration, it opens up the shooters in Gasol, Green, and even to an extent Ibaka, who did have I think 1-3. It opens them up to be used to their maximum potential. As the third quarter went on, you saw the Raptor offense as a whole become more involved. Everyone was involved, right? The Raptor offense operated off every single player. Whereas for the Magic, you saw them rely entirely on Aaron Gordon to get their points. Fournier was no longer hitting shots. Like, I know he was 8 of 16, a marked improvement from his previous games, but most of these 8 came in the first half. He was clanking a lot of open transition threes, and because of his inability to knock those down, you could see that the Raptor defense, they were sagging off of him, daring him to shoot and putting more of their defensive pressure onto the likes of Gordon and Vucevic. I really thought that the third quarter, essentially, it was the Raptors showing the Magic and everyone else that they haven't figured out completely, right? If you neutralize Vucevic, the one player, as we've been saying multiple times in the past, videos, if you neutralize Vucevic with someone like Marc Gasol, that entire offense is crippled because they can't do any dribble penetration anymore. They can no longer get easy threes with a threat of Vooch scoring in the post. So you're basically saying, we dare you to shoot 3-pointers and beat us consistently like that. And someone like, they don't have the personnel to do that. Ross, I know, is probably the only one that could actually knock down those threes, but he's a streaky shooter. You stick 2 players on him or get right into his face like the Raptors did with Van Vliet and Powell at times, he's not going to make all of them. And right, so you don't have DJ Augustine who's making his shots. Evan Fournier, can't shoot. I don't understand why Clifford, like, I still don't understand the mentality of putting Isaac in for 16 minutes. You need to put in Jonathan Isaac if you even have a chance at keeping this game close, and he just didn't. Like, it was a very strange decision. Like, Nurse gambled on Kawhi and Lowry last game, and it paid off, right? Why not do the same with Isaac, especially if you need to win this game, like, in terms of a whole mentality point of view. So we go into the fourth quarter, and at this point, Kawhi is 11 of 17 with 30 points. 11 of 17. Let that sink in for a bit. He's torching them. No matter how many defenders they throw on him, he's still getting his points. Bench at this point has 26 points combined compared to the Magic's 13. So the one bright spot of the Orlando Magic throughout this series has not showed up today in comparison to the Raptors. And all I can say is great job to Norm. He really showed up. He's gotten better as the games have gone by, and I really think that if he can continue to produce like this, we will not see OG Anunoby until maybe even the finals, assuming the Raptors get there. Because I know the reports say that he's available at the Eastern Conference Finals, but I think that means, like, medically he'll be ready, right? You still got to factor in he needs to practice, he needs to do everything else. I think if Norm continues to play this well, we might see the rotation stuck at 8 or 7. Like, OG might not see any time, which is fine for me because Norm has been playing great. And if he continues, he will be that X factor that he was in that 2015 to 2016 playoff run, right? When he first burst on out of nowhere. And, you know, in that game, what was it? Game 7 or game 6? I don't know. It was that game where he did that Superman dunk after the Pacers were up in the fourth quarter. He steals it from Paul George, caps it off with a Superman dunk, and the Raptors are tied. That's when we had Bismack Biyombo. Like, the man is an X factor. And let's all remember, he was the guy who essentially, when the Raptors were playing the Bucks, I think the year after, he was the guy that came through and he balled out. So yeah, Norm has the potential to be that X factor that the Raptors desperately need. Because right now, as good as the Raptors are with Leonard, Siakam, Gasol, right? They still need that third person that can create their own shot. And if Norm is that person, other teams better watch out. Overall, this game was a complete beatdown after the first quarter. But 50 points in the paint for the Raptors. They're getting what the hell they want. They figured out how to, work around the Orlando defense. They had 11 threes. They forced the Magic to commit 17 turnovers in contrast to their own 11. Crowd was taken out. Great game by the Raptors. And if you're the Magic, you're surely disappointed, as many of the fans were, as so many of them were leaving the Amway Center towards the end of the fourth quarter. And at this point, it's like a 20-plus point lead. So Steve Clifford subs everyone out, puts in, the bench. Same thing with Nick Nurse with less than 2 minutes to go. And yeah, I really think, as I said earlier, Raptors have this series pretty much wrapped up. They figured out the Magic after game 2, I think. And game 3 was kind of just like them executing, and now this game was basically confirmed everything. I don't see the Magic winning game 5. I would be very surprised if they did, but anything can happen. They're going back to Toronto, and let's hope that the Toronto Raptors close this out, because it's looking like Philadelphia is their next round opponent, and that's going to be incredibly interesting to see. But yeah, I'll see you guys after game 5.